Hello, everyone, and welcome. We're so glad you're here with us today for Connect with Technology, AI-powered fundraising for nonprofits. My name is Julianne Randolph, and I'm the small business librarian at the San Francisco Public Library. We're excited to partner with the Office of Economic and Workforce Development to bring you this session today. We'll share a bit about them in a moment, but we would like to kick things off with the San Francisco Public Library's land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that the San Francisco Public Library sits on the unceded ancestral territory of the Ramaytush Ohlone peoples, and we give thanks for our ability to live, work, learn, and build community on their unceded ancestral land. Today's session will explore accessible and practical tools that help community organizations grow stronger, especially as the landscape of technology and fundraising continues to evolve. Our goal this afternoon is to explore how AI can support nonprofits in securing sustainable funding in ways that feel authentic and ethical. We are honored to partner with Jerry Trotter from the Office of Economic and Workforce Development. I'd like to invite him to share a bit about their nonprofit development program and the work they're doing to support organizations across the city.
Great. Thank you, Julianne. We as well are honored to partner with the San Francisco Public Library Small Business Center and Justin Steele today as our presenter. I come from OEWD's nonprofit business development team, our business development team, with a focus on our nonprofit sector. In that work, we support nonprofits around navigating city systems, um, building capacities around supporting their mission and executing their mission, and all that may entail, right? It could be leadership development, it could be kind of marketing and outreach, it could be finding space and expanding their programs, it could be workforce development. And so some of those things are kind of places where we like to kind of lean in and support organizations around what could be a little bit prickly to navigate, things like permitting and things like that. And so we provide myself as a liaison and a direct connect to the nonprofit leadership in public. I can always be reached directly and schedule for meetings and provide that customized support. And so again, happy to be here. Happy to connect in this opportunity for the nonprofit sector in a learning session with this innovative tool of AI and how it might improve the work that a lot of these nonprofits are doing. And I kick it back to you, Julian.
Okay, thank you, Jerry. I'll tell everyone a bit about our library's Small Business Center, which is located at the main library. We're on the fourth floor of the main library. We support entrepreneurs, nonprofits, and community groups with free advising, research tools, workshops, and one-on-one support. Our goal is always the same: to help mission-driven organizations build capacity, strengthen their operations, and serve their communities with confidence. And we are so thankful to be a part of an amazing network of city departments and nonprofit organizations that provide support to the nonprofit development community. So today's session is also part of our One City, One Book initiative, which is the library's annual citywide reading initiative to get every San Franciscan to read the same book. This year's selection is The Worlds I See by Dr. Fei-Fei Li, a computer scientist whose journey from an immigrant teenager facing hardship to becoming one of the most influential voices in AI is both moving and deeply relevant to our conversation today. So I encourage folks to check it out and also explore the other programs the library has going on the next few months that support this reading initiative. Dr. Lee builds a compelling case for building technology with care, inclusion, and compassion, and for ensuring that AI serves human values, not the other way around. So quick plug for that book. Go to your local branch. There's multiple copies. Some branches even have copies you can take and keep forever. And with that, I'll hand it back to Jerry, who will introduce our presenter.
Thank you, Julie. Videos being a little funny with me. But without further ado, we are honored to be in space to introduce Justin Steele. Justin Steele holds a Harvard MBA, MPA, and an undergraduate degree in engineering. He began his career at Bain and Company, Europe, in the Bridgespan Group, building a foundation in both business strategy and social impact. He went on to spend a decade at Google Foundation, or google.org, where he directed over 700 million in philanthropic grants through the Google Foundation. But when Justin and his wife, Sally, launched their own nonprofit, Algorithm Collective, which leads transformative camping adventures for urban families, they couldn't afford the very fundraising tools he once held. So Justin and all its innovation built something better, powered by AI. Today, Justin is the co-founder and CEO of Condor, a public benefit corporation working to the professional fundraising tools. He also serves as a trustee of the San Francisco Foundation. Justin combines big company expertise with startup grit to ensure every good idea has a fair shot at success. With all that, the most important thing that Justin is a parent committed to a better future. He and Sally are raising their four daughters in California. And so we are happy to have a co-founder, a former fund um, director, uh, someone who's readily and immediately in the work with AI and improving its process for nonprofits. We're excited to have join us for webinar today, Justin Dale.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jerry. It's great to be with all of you. I'm looking down the attendee list and seeing friendly faces like Leo Sosa from Dev Mission. So I feel like I'm with family. So it's really, really good to be with you all. I would love for this to be interactive. So we'll be talking a lot about AI and the ways that I use it to kind of help with the fundraising flow today. But feel free to drop questions in the Q&A. And if there's at any point, I'm happy to sort of stop. I'd love for this to be a dialogue. I don't want to talk at you for the full session. And I am going to attempt to share my screen at different points. We'll try to make it interactive. I'm hoping to be able to leave you just like really tangible examples of the ways that I'm using AI to sort of help with my workflows. And I hope that I can leave that with you all. So I really appreciate Jerry, Julianne for the opportunity. And thank you, Jerry, for such a generous introduction. I'll give you all a little bit more about my background so you kind of know where I'm coming from, and then we can dive in. But I have an engineering degree from the University of Virginia, but I'm not a software engineer. So I was a chemical engineering major. I've never, prior to a year or so ago, done any kind of software development. This is not my sort of area of expertise, but with the advent of AI, I've been able to really be able to sort of jump in and I feel like AI is like jumping into an Iron Man suit. It just like powers you up in really potent ways. And so I do have an engineering degree, so I'm not afraid to jump in and build things. I also have a nonprofit background. After graduate school, I did 5 years at a nonprofit called Year Up. I was the program director of the Washington, D.C. site for that organization, so doing workforce development. And then came out here. I live in Oakland, but worked in San Francisco for 10 years at google.org. So I led their largest philanthropy team. I led the Americas region, which included, funding all of the work in the Bay Area. So I've had an opportunity to work and fund with a lot of you on the call, and it's really been a privilege to be able to do that. And yeah, I left google.org about a year ago and have been out here building. My wife and I, as Jerry mentioned, founded a nonprofit called Outdoor Rhythm Collective. Outdoor Rhythm Collective is all about getting urban families out into nature, particularly on public land. We're aspiring to combat isolation, to bridge community, to really introduce people to these natural spaces, but even more deeply than that, to be able to connect them with each other and reconnect them with the land. And we've had that nonprofit for a couple years now, and so I started that with my wife. She's the executive director. I've been mostly just working nights and weekends while I was at Google, but when I left Google, I started working on that a little bit more intensely. And in the process, was back on the other side of the fundraising table, so trying to figure out how to raise funds for this fledgling nonprofit that we started up. And that's where I really started to run into the limitations of what it looks like to try to source funding and prospect. And so we had this moment in February of this year. We were preparing for our first winter camping trip, which is kind of a big deal for people who have largely never camped before to actually camp during the winter months. Obviously, California has got a more moderate winter than most places, but it's still, there's rain, there's cold, there's just different things to deal with. And so we were getting ready for this President's Day weekend trip in February. And we needed to buy these heaters that we like to use in our tents, and each of those heaters is a couple $1,000s, and we only had $30,000 in the bank, and we were trying to figure out how to do this, and we decided, okay, it's time to get really serious about fundraising, and so it was like 11 o'clock at night. Our four daughters were upstairs, like asleep, and we just decided, like, all right, let's create some accounts and start to do some donor prospecting. And one of those platforms that I went on was Instrumental, and it's a really impressive platform. I entered my profile in and checked the boxes of the topics that we're working on, and immediately got literally 2,500 matches, and I was super overwhelmed because I was like, when these look like they're interesting, but there's no way that I am actually a match for 2,500 different funders. And so I was trying to figure out, like, okay, how do I actually narrow these down? And there wasn't an obvious way to narrow that down other than to start taking different check boxes that I had done off, which I didn't want to do because I didn't want to exclude myself from funders who might be a fit. And so I reached out to some of my friends in philanthropy and was asking, like, are there any other tools, particularly tools that are leveraging AI? I mean, one of the benefits of working at Google is that, like, GPT was literally created at Google. And so I kind of had a front row seat to the creation of AI, or the creation of generative AI at least, and funded nonprofits who are using it and leveraging it. And I just everybody kind of came back and was like, there's just really nothing. Like, there's nothing that's leveraging it in this way. And I know that AI has a number of superpowers, and one of those superpowers is structuring unstructured information. So if there's like a ton of information about funders, I know AI can take that information, can structure it, and can actually tell me of these 2,500 funders which are actually a fit for me. And so I jumped into, at the time, a coding program called Cursor, and I started writing my own Python scripts to help me match with these funders. And just went through this process, and it was great. Like, I ended up getting down to a really tight list of funders who were actually a fit for me. I used a number of different AI tools, and we'll kind of walk through some of these today, but I used a tool called Perplexity to go and do web research on each of these funders. Perplexity is a great tool if you want to go out onto the public web and find information and synthesize it. I use OpenAI's reasoning models to essentially personify a program officer. So once I knew a lot of information about those funders, I use that information to give it to OpenAI's reasoning models to say, you are a funder. Here's who you are. Take a look at Outdoor Rhythm Collective in our profile, and then you tell me, like, is this a fit or not, not a fit? And then once I had those matches and I was down to a pretty tight list, I then used Claude, which is a AI model built by a company called Anthropic. And I tend to think that Claude is the most human writer of the major AI models. And so I used Claude to take the information that I had about the funder, the information that I had about myself and as Outdoor Rhythm Collective, and write the first drafts of my application, and write some of my outreach emails to people who worked at the funders that I wanted to try to connect with. So I did that, and kind of was just doing it for myself, and then had a number of people reaching out saying, hey, I've heard that you're doing this thing. Can you run some matches for me? I started running matches for my friends, and at some point realized, wow, this is really a product. I should build this. And so I linked up with my co-founder Karibu, who works at Meta right now, and we've known each other for a couple of decades. Just a deeply missional oriented person, and we built this public benefit corporation called Kindora that we launched in August, and it essentially automates the pieces that I just talked about and makes it super easy for nonprofits to kind of get matches and get deep donor intelligence and apply. So I'll walk you through Kindora in a little bit, but what I wanted to do was just kind of walk you through how just even today, if you wanted to not even use a tool like Kindora, but just use kind of what's out there, how you could actually start to use AI to do some deep donor matching and prospecting with the tools that are there. And then I'll show you a little bit about how Kindora automates some of the process. Um, so before I jump into like the actual, I'll share my screen and we'll kind of like walk through the things. I do just want to acknowledge that I think for a lot of us, there's a lot of concerns around AI, and I definitely want to kind of acknowledge a few of those things up front. I think one of the aspects that I think a lot about is the ways in which AI is concentrating wealth. I don't want to deny the fact that essentially what we've done as AI companies is take what was formerly kind of public domain, right? Knowledge that sort of belonged to all of us that was created on the internet. We've taken that public domain knowledge, we've fenced it off, put it through sort of AI algorithms, and then extracted the value out of it and are now selling it back to people. And there are some challenging aspects of that. I mean, capitalism is largely built on that process of sort of like, cordon off, extract, and sort of sell back to people. But I do think that we are in a moment where we really do risk concentrating wealth even further than it's been. And so I think a lot about that. And I think one of the things that I'm really passionate about and why I'm excited to spend the time with you all is how do we get that knowledge in the hands of people like you all, so that we can build new entities, increase the performance of our organizations, and hopefully, have kind of innovation that lives outside of just a few companies who will concentrate all of the benefits of AI among a small class of owners. And so I think AI is like a superpower that really could democratize access to building and app development and all kinds of things. I'm excited about that, but I know it's going to require a lot of intentional effort. So I want to acknowledge that. I also want to acknowledge the environmental footprint of AI. It's very energy intensive to do this work, and there's just no way around that. And so I do think that from a regulatory and governance perspective, we've really got to make sure that companies are being environmentally responsible and investing in carbon offsets and green energy as much as possible because this stuff is very energy intensive. And then I think the last thing I want to acknowledge before we jump into this AI piece is just that obviously these models are trained on the internet. Um, I don't want to get too much into AI theory, but essentially AI is just a language prediction model. It's just literally trying to predict what's the right next word in a sequence of words in response to your queries. But it's trained on the internet. And when you're trained on sort of a corpus body of knowledge, it also is going to inject whatever biases exist inside that system. And so, depending on how you're using AI, if you're using it to make consequential decisions about human beings that might be impacted by bias, you got to be pretty careful with how you're using it. And so, I kind of think like it's just like driving a car, right? Car can be a really powerful thing. I got a 16-year-old now, so I'm still getting used to the idea of I have a daughter who's actually driving now. And it's a little scary as a parent to have a new driver in your house, but it's also hugely beneficial. Like she's picking up her freshman high schooler sister from basketball practice today, so I don't have to. And that's kind of amazing. But it's also like there's a lot of responsibility that goes in with driving it, and you got to understand sort of how the rules of the road, how to do it safely. And there's definitely unsafe ways to use AI, particularly when it comes to bias. When I was at google.org, there was a proposal that it was in front of me. This was like maybe 4 or 5 years ago, even before ChatGPT had dropped, but they were going to use AI to help inform parole hearing decisions. And I think they were actually using it in a relatively responsible way. But still, you're in very sort of dangerous territory if you're going to use AI to make a consequential decision like that, where the AI is going to listen to a parole hearing and then compare it and pattern recognize based on its training how that parole hearing went and then weigh in as to whether somebody should receive such a consequential life decision like parole. And obviously we know that there's going to be some bias inherent in the model. So I just wanted, that'll be the third thing I wanted to acknowledge is this: we should be very, very conscious about how you're using the models. And I do see somebody was also acknowledging here in the comments that, it's copyrighted material as well, right? So yeah, it's not just the internet, but books and publications and articles and video content. I mean, these companies have ingested all of it. So I do, I think absolutely that's an important thing to acknowledge. Okay, acknowledgments up front. I think it's important, especially in these social impact spaces. I'm with all of you. I'm sure you all think a lot about these topics as well, and I think it's important for us to acknowledge up front some of the ways that this technology can be harmful and make sure we're using it responsibly. So with that said, I'd love to just kind of maybe dive into in my nonprofit kind of founder hat, how I've been using AI to help us fundraise. And so I'm going to just share kind of my process, some of my documents and tools and prompts. Hopefully it's super practical. And then kind of at the end of that, I'll show you how we put that together in our company, Kindora, to kind of automate that and encourage you all to check that out if you'd like to. The tool is free to try it out. And we're really trying to make it super accessible for smaller grassroots nonprofits in particular. So if I step back, like the first kind of challenge is prospecting, right? Like, how do you actually figure out what the universe of funders is? And that's actually that's pretty hard. I think particularly as just an individual kind of sitting at your desk to figure out like, well, what's the sort of world of funders? Who could possibly, fund my organization? So I'm gonna share my screen and see if I can get this working here. Um, so yes, you all should see. I've got my instrumental profile up for Outdoor Rhythm Collective. So I'm gonna start here and kind of show you this tool first. So um, this is the tool that I started in. It's very expensive. It's $4,000 a year for the subscription that I'm on, and so I think not super accessible for a lot of organizations, and it certainly gave me a lot of pause to pay that much money. For access to a tool like this, but I think if you're looking for broad-based funder matching, I do think Instrumental is one of the, if not the best platform out there. I'm sure some of you have already been in this tool, but I wanted to show it to you. This is what the profile for Outdoor Rhythm Collective looks like. You can see that right now it's showing, 1,700-ish, maybe 1,800 funder matches. And there's two types of matches. These opportunity matches are like programs that you can apply for right now. So you can kind of scroll through and see like these funders are all accessible and available. If I look at this like Yamaha Outdoor Initiative, I can click over to their website. And I can see sort of when the deadlines are and what the information is and see the guidelines. And so, but one of the challenges with Instrumental is that it's not, it's actually, a lot of these grants aren't applicable to Outdoor Rhythm Collective because it's doing very, very broad-based matching. So I don't know if I went here to even to this Domtar Community Investment Grant. I've literally never looked at this, but we'll just see like what are they into. It selected this because it saw that my organization does some work on environment. This one is management and use of forests as a sustainable resource. Obviously, like my work bringing families out on a public land doesn't really directly speak to the management or use of forests. And so this wouldn't actually be a fit for me. And if you scrolled through a lot of these 1800 matches, you'd see a lot of that, where it's giving you very, very broad sort of matches, um, just based on sort of matching you to historical profiles. But there's a lot of good information in here. You can see, like, you can look at all the historical giving. I'm on the board of the San Francisco Foundation, so I don't know, maybe I'll pull that one up real quick and just kind of show you. You can go all the way back to 2009 in the giving profiles. You can see sort of how much funding was given each year, and you can look at sort of historical grantees. San Francisco Foundation's a little tricky because there's so many donor advised funds that this isn't all just folks who have given as program officers, but this is also kind of the opaque vehicles of donor advised funds mixed in with all of that. So you may or may not be able to get to the person who's behind all of this funding. But it's a powerful tool. It's just that I think for smaller nonprofits, it can be quite overwhelming to use. But if you're going to try to go out and find so sort of like what's the universe of potential funder matches? I think a tool like Instrumental, Candid is another one. I don't think it's as nearly as good of a user interface and friendly user experience as Instrumental. It's also quite expensive. But tools like that. Now, you can also just use AI to try to do some of this work. I did pull up here. ChatGPT has a deep research function. If I'm sure some of you have used it, it's quite powerful. It essentially goes out on the internet. It'll research for 20 or 30 minutes and find opportunities for you. You just go down here and you click this little deep research button when you're when you're prospecting. And you can see here, I uploaded just a couple of documents about Outdoor Rhythm Collective, an impact framework, and an overview, and then just asked it to please research potential philanthropic funders. It asked me a few follow-up questions. What's the geographic scope, things like that. And then it went off. You can see it searched for 11 minutes. It did 160 different Google searches, or whatever equivalent to Google search that it's using. And these are the results. So you can see that it pulled up, I don't know, maybe 10, 12 funders here. I think it did a pretty good job of identifying some good ones, some fellowship and accelerator programs like DRK and Echoing Green. This North Face Explorer Fund is actually no longer in existence. So, it oftentimes does find outdated information. If people have been in the last few years talking about this program, it'll pick that up and didn't necessarily know that like last year the North Face stopped that program. So some of this information is a little bit outdated, but REI is a good one. Cliff Family Foundation we've applied for. Um, Actually, of this whole list, this Einhorn Collaborative was actually the one that I had never heard of before. I just ran this query this morning, and I had never seen this one before. So I think this was actually really helpful, and I decided to do a little bit of additional research on Einhorn, which I'll show you all. Um, but I think that this is like a decent way to kind of get started. But you can see, like, you've got a dozen funders here versus Instrumental, you've got 1,800. And I think so it can kind of get you there a little bit, but ultimately there's kind of no substitute for going into a bigger database. Now, if you wanted to do the primary research yourself, like the 990 tax forms of all the funders in the United States are all publicly available. You can go to the IRS and download them. I did that for Kindora. We have all the raw data, but it's quite complex to kind of ingest all that information, although you can use AI tools to help you cut it. And then you could do some of your own prospecting and research. But I think for me, what I've kind of, at least when I started, before I built Kindora, I didn't think there was much of a substitute for just subscribing to something like Instrumental if I wanted to get that very long tail. The other piece that you can do is just look at like who funds your peer organizations. And I think that's really a good place to start. You can look at their annual reports. You can look at some of the 990 forms and try to see who is funding organizations that are similar to yours. There's a lot of manual work in that. And actually, the first thing that Kindora does if you create a profile is makes a few API calls and finds all of the funders of your peers. You enter in some peers, we suggest some peers, and in seconds we can actually tell you every single institutional funder that funds the peer organizations, and so you can get a pretty quick ecosystem map. So I think that's tends to be you've got to probably have access to a tool unless you're comfortable kind of making your own API calls. But looking at the peers is a really good way to do it. So that's prospecting, and that's kind of how I've used AI to do my prospecting research. Now, once you prospect and you get a list of funders like this, then you want to get some deep donor intelligence, right? Like you'd like to know exactly who these funders are, what they fund, what their missions are, what different programs do they fund, who are their program officers, so you can really assess the proper fit. And so I have a couple of prompts to do that, and I'm going to actually share with you these funder research instructions. I'm just going to paste the link. This is a Google document that should be available to everybody. And so I'll paste it here into the comments. Um, but this is the prompt that I use to do funder research. So I just actually paste this funder research prompt directly into ChatGPT Deep Research, and I just replace the funder name and the website. And if I have a specific program within the funder that I'm curious about, I'll also replace those. And I might tell it a little bit about the organization that I'm searching for, although that's not necessary if you are just trying to do sort of a broad thing. And so I actually ran this query earlier today because I did it for the Einhorn Collaborative, because I mentioned I had done this search and found them for the first time, and was curious about them. They're doing kind of social cohesion and civic unity, which is really exactly what I tend to do. And so in Outdoor Rhythm Collective. So here is what that prompt looked like. This is just a copy and paste of the document I shared with you. You can see I just substituted Einhorn Collaborative in the website, and I said that we're Outdoor Rhythm Collective. I attached a couple of PDFs just to give it an overview of Outdoor Rhythm Collective so that it kind of knows where I'm coming from. And yeah, like it went off in this case for 25 minutes. It did 24 searches, found 15 sources, and it produced a very, very thorough document here. You can see it starts with an overall alignment. It thinks that this program strongly aligns with Outdoor Rhythm Collective's focus on bridging divides and fostering cohesion and unity. It's telling me about their bridging strategy, their belonging strategy. Um, it's also got a risks and challenges here. It's saying that they don't accept unsolicited proposals, which is really good to know. So I know now that I'm not going to be able to actually apply publicly, but I'm going to have to jump in here and I'm gonna have to network my way to this foundation. I actually sent the CEO of this foundation a LinkedIn request last night, so I'm already starting that process. And I used all of this intelligence to help me write that outreach. But it's very thorough. That's just the summary up top. You can see here it's going to give you mission, strategic focus. They have programs on bonding, bridging, belonging, financial parameters. Let's see. Okay, so $3 to $5 million in annual grant making per year. So I kind of know that. Any eligibility restrictions? Again, they don't accept unsolicited things. What's the application process? Obviously, they typically initiate that. They look at the grant making patterns. Okay, now they're telling me like who's the funders who are the organizations they've funded in the past: Bridge USA, Service Year Alliance, City Year, Braver Angels, New Pluralists. So it's helpful. I'm kind of getting to know all of that. So you can see it's very, very thorough. There's a lot of information in here. And I will honestly, I won't even read all of this. I mean, I'll skim it. But really, this document is for AI because this document is like 15 pages long, but this is going to be the context window prompt for AI to help me figure out whether this is a fit with Outdoor Rhythm Collective. So So I've got my deep research now, and I know who Einhorn Collective is. I know everything about them as a funder, at least the stuff that's publicly available that they've published on their website, so the public is talking about. So the next thing I need to do is be able to create a profile of Outdoor Rhythm Collective so that the AI can have a very thorough understanding of who we are. So I'm going to share with you also the prompt that I used to come up with an organizational profile. So there you go for that. This is a little bit of a shorter prompt, but still actually still pretty lengthy, but maybe not quite as long as the Funder one. But this is really meant to create a very thorough profile of my organization. And in this case, I'm not actually probably going to go do a deep research query because I already know everything about my own organization. And so instead, I think I have this prompt up. Let me see if I have. Oh yes, perfect. So this is the copy and paste of the ChatGPT prompt that I did here. In this case, I actually used GPT-5 Pro as my model. And yeah, I just attached my internal documents. So I have an internal document that has our founder bios and story, our trip history, an impact framework overview. And then it actually asked me a few follow-up questions, and I realized, oh, I should give you my program analytics and my fundraising analytics as well. So I attached those documents. And then I let it go off for 19 minutes and kind of do its GPT-5 Pro thing and really think about this. And it ended up creating this very thorough profile of Outdoor Rhythm Collective. And it's got all of our information and a really thorough thing. So now you're sitting here, you got a really deep profile of the funder, you've got a deep profile of your organization, and now it's time to kind of make the magic happen. So I mentioned that I really like Claude as my writing model. So if you're not familiar with Claude, I definitely recommend jumping on. One of the powerful things that you can do with Claude is it's got these concepts of projects. I think ChatGPT has a similar thing where you can put project files together, but you can see I have all kinds of different project files for the different organizations that I'm affiliated with. But I've got one here for Outdoor Rhythm Collective, and it's got all these documents in it that is just background knowledge. It already knows all of these things about Outdoor Rhythm Collective. And so if I wanted to say, let's just pretend that I got invited by the Einhorn Collaborative to apply for funding, and I created a little mock, sort of pretend mock application. So I'm going to load that up. And it's just a document that I created before this call. It just has some basic questions that they would be likely to ask me. I'm going to load up that ChatGPT profile that they did for the Einhorn Collaborative, and I'm going to upload Outdoor Rhythm Collective's profile that was also generated by ChatGPT. So I'm just going to load up all three of those documents. And while they're loading, I'll just do a quick prompt to say, like, I'm, Outdoor Rhythm Collective. I'm applying, for this grant um, from Einhorn Collaborative. Um, I've attached their grant application. Can you please write me first drafts of the answers? Stick within the word limits. Um, and I'll just hit go. And I'm using Claude Sonnet 4.5 right now. Claude also has an Opus 4.1, which is a more advanced model. You've got a shorter quota for how many prompts you're allowed with Opus. I think they both work pretty well, but I'll generally, for a final version, I'll probably use Opus. But you can see it's giving me some of the organizational information filled out. But this is kind of the meat of it here. Like, how your work addresses America's crisis of connection and division. And yeah, it's gonna take all of my information and it's gonna try to weave it into exactly what Einhorn Collaborative is looking for. And you can see we tackle the empathy gap between urban families separated by race and class. A single mother from Oakland who's never felt safe sleeping without a locked door. That's actually a direct quote from one of our participants. I recognize that from our testimony doc. The tech worker from Palo Alto who's never met someone from that neighborhood, the black father who doesn't feel the wilderness is for him. Um, And so yeah, there's that's the draft of that question. They want to give a brief overview. So here's 150 words on that. Here's the theory of change that they came up with. And it's still writing. So you can see it's quite powerful if you feed it a deep research document on the funder, you feed it a thorough document on your organization and prompt it for this. And honestly, at this point, like all of these answers are pretty good first draft. I'll go through, I'll read them. Oftentimes, what I'll do is copy these answers. I will go back over to GPT-5 Pro and say, "Hey, critique this answer." GPT's reasoning models are really, really good, so it'll come up with great critiques, and I'll just bring those critiques right back over here and say, "Here's a critique. Can you write me additional drafts based on the critiques?" And so yeah, so it's gonna keep writing here, but I think you get the gist here. That's kind of like how I do this by hand. And I would also use this to write outreach notes and all kinds of materials. And again, you want to make sure you keep a human in the loop here, so don't completely rely on AI. You want to check for bias, you want to check for any kind of hallucinations. You're working with your own documents here, and so the chance of it hallucinating and making up information is significantly less because you're telling it like, "Hey, I've given you these documents and answer the questions based on the documents." You could even explicitly put that in the prompt. That would probably be a little bit safer just to write like only answer the questions based on the documents that I've given you, and you're likely to get good information. So um, that is how I would do this in a traditional process, just kind of outside the of a dedicated tool, and that's how I was doing it all the way up until February. That's how I would do my research. That's how I would write the draft materials and do the sort of the deep research. Now, Kindora essentially does a lot of this for you. So I'm just going to pull up the Kindora dashboard real quick. This is our Outdoor Rhythm Collective account. You can see here that I've got an initial set of funder matches. So this has actually gone through that list of 2,500 matches from platforms like Instrumental, Candid, Internet Research, like all the things. Like you kind of grab funders from multiple sources, drop them in here. As I mentioned on the back end, Kindora is doing some web internet research, looking at their websites, really building funder profiles for every funder that you've got, and then you fill out your own profile for the organization, and it's going to look at every single one. So it's going to go, you know, 2,500 times and just go through. And I've built the prompts on the back end because I was a program officer to be like, "Hey, you're a program officer, so you need to think like a program officer, act like a program officer. And when you're looking at these matches, you need to think like I thought when I was in the funder seat." And so you can see, we've got actually the score of the matches here. We've got 34 of them, so a much more manageable number. And these are the top ones for Outdoor Rhythm Collective. On my filters, I can actually, there's quite a few more funders if I wanted to expand it even beyond the very top matches. I get all the way up to 335. And so, I can kind of decide how I want to filter my lists. When I click into these funders and learn more, you can see this is Smartwool. They have an active kind of corporate social responsibility program for folks like Outdoor Rhythm Collective. You can see there's an overview. It analyzes the match. It tells me which fund I was matched for, kind of geographically, where they're focused. This is all the high level stuff here. So I can rate the match and provide my own notes, but this is a high level. And then what I think the magic really happens, you can see this little generate brief here. When you're ready to commit to a funder and go really deep, you can generate these intel briefs. They take a while to compile because we do a lot of AI research on the back end. But we're essentially taking those deep research reports and your organizational profile and enriching it with additional information like the 990s, everything else, and we're getting down to it. So if I click into the view brief on like someone like Smartwool, you'll see I've got a snapshot of the funder alignment. It thinks we're strongly aligned. It gives me a summary of the points. In the deep dive section, I can get down into the specific strategic pillars, grant making history and patterns. And again, all of this is very specific to Outdoor Rhythm Collective. Here's the NTE codes that they have funded in the past. These are the nonprofit codes that are topics. So camps, environmental education, alliances and advocacy, community and neighborhood development. So I kind of know who they funded, what the positioning strategy would be for us, 3 to 5 points that would resonate, the relationship engagement plan. So it's telling me like, hey, the primary person you probably want to reach out to is, Alicia Chin. So take a look at that. And then the magic kind of comes into some of this, like the email template. Like if I was going to do some quick outreach, like who are the people that I would want to outreach to, and what would I potentially say to them? Here's an email template. We actually do a meeting guide too. So if Sally and I were going to sit down and actually run through a meeting, like here's how we might want to structure that. And we got a of intent template. So if we were invited to submit an LOI, here's what that would be. Again, these are helpful documents, but honestly, it's mostly used for AI. So this Intel packet is helpful for you, but it's also very, very helpful for AI to have a good understanding of what your overlap would be. And so once you've got that, Kindora is going to help you find those matches. Kindora is going to help you. Uh, get those intel briefs so you can kind of know exactly where the overlap is. And then we actually have a draft tool here where you can actually apply for funding and fill out an application. So I've got one teed up. The Yogi Foundation is one of the ones for Kindora. So I might just call this like the Yogi Foundation application. Our grants are usually smaller because we're brand new, so maybe we'll say 50,000, and let's say that the deadline is a couple of weeks from now. That's all I really need there. I have a few documents loaded up for Outdoor Rhythm Collective, so I can check those documents. It's already got my profile. But I can also add more documents in here if I have more documents that I wanted to do. Is going to ask me to parse the grant application. So I'm just going to upload the grant application. So I've got that saved on my computer here. Here's the application. So now it's going to parse it and figure out like, okay, what are the questions, in the grant application that need to be answered. So this is using just Claude on the back end. It's kind of doing that. So great. Like, these are the questions that were in the grant application. The grant application was long. It had a bunch of language in it, but it found the questions and it found the word limit. So here's the 4 questions. Here's the associated word limits. Great. That looks good. I can edit it if it didn't get it right, but it looks like it got it right. Um, it's getting ready to write. I can choose a persona or create a persona. Oftentimes, different funders have different personas, or you may want to have a specific persona that you like to write in to reflect your voice, so you can emphasize that. And then we just create the application. So what's happening on the back end is just like what you saw with me doing this manually with Claude, it's doing this now through API calls. So it's taking all of that deep research about the funder. It's taking the profile that I have on Outdoor Rhythm Collective. It's taking those additional documents that I had, and it's drafting answers for all these questions and doing it within the word limits. And you'll see them start to populate down here. And I think one of the cool things about this feature is that instead of it all being in one big long prompt window where you kind of have to copy and paste the things out, you're actually getting those application questions just popping right in here separately. So if one looks good, but one needs a lot of work, you can kind of separate that out. And you can work on that specific one. And so it's going to finish that last one. And what's cool is like you can edit those questions directly yourself. So in a second, you'll be able to see I'll be able to go in here and do my own writing. Or if I want to, so good. So those 4 questions generated. So, if I didn't like this sentence, I could just delete it. I could change words. But also, I can use AI and say, make this answer more data driven. Maybe I felt like there wasn't enough data and information in there. And so now, specifically with this question, it can go back to all my documents. It can look at all the context, and hopefully it'll add some more evidence base into the answer on this question. So let's see if it did that. So yeah, hopefully that answer is a little bit more data driven and we've got a refined response. So anyways, that's the Kindora tool, essentially taking what was that manual process that I kind of showed you. And yeah, like kind of putting it into an automated process that just hopefully saves you time, and you don't have to worry about doing all of that and trying to make it very accessible. Like I said, we have a generous free tier where you can do a couple of these applications a month for free. And then if you want to do a higher volume, I think our plans are starting at like $40 or $50 a month. We're just moving out of our free beta onto paid plans. So, um, yeah, maybe I'll stop there. I have so much more I could say and share, but I think I also like I use Claude Code a lot to do um, a lot of my coding and overhauling of websites, creating apps, creating products, creating landing pages, and all of that. That's a little bit outside the scope of just straight fundraising. That's more like branding, marketing. Create a landing page for me with this. I'm happy to show you all what that looks like if it's interesting to you. But that one's a little bit of a maybe a 202 instead of a 101. So if it's something that's interesting, I'm happy to pop open Cloud Code and kind of show you guys how to use Claude Code. But I'll let you tell me whether that's something that you would like to see. And yeah, I think maybe we'll stop there for now and pause. I feel like I've talked a long time, so it'd be good to just kind of get a pulse check from you all, see if you have any questions, what I can share, and then happy to continue to screen share and show some of these things. But yeah, why don't we pause there and see if folks have questions? And I don't know, Julianne and Jerry, if folks are able to come off of mute or if we're just going to be taking the questions um, in the written prompt box. You tell me.
Hi, we could do it either way. So if you have a question for Justin, please let us know. You could put it in the Q&A, and maybe if you need to provide more context, we can allow you to talk. See, Amelia has their hand raised.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, we got you.
Okay, great. I apologize for coming in late. My other meeting ran overtime than expected. But I did catch the end of it, and I was just wondering, um, is it mainly just Pandora is like one of the main resources for AI, like nonprofit fundraising?
Yeah, so what we talked about at the beginning, Amelia, is how you could string together this same process that Kindora is using, but just in sort of the off-the-shelf tools that you're probably familiar with. So I use OpenAI's deep research to create like deep research funder profiles, and I shared some of the links there. In the chat for the prompts that I use, and then I use Perplexity to do a little bit of web research as well. And then I use Claude, Anthropic's model Claude, to do writing. So I think this is going to be recorded, right, guys? So you're welcome to go back and look at the beginning of that. But I think if you want to just use some off-the-shelf products, put it together that way. I shared the process that I used before I created Kindora, kind of do this manually. I do think on the prospecting side of like how you go figure out who should be in your grant pipeline, you can use AI tools for that, but I showed an example of deep research. It gave me about a dozen or so funders, one of which was quite interesting that I hadn't heard about before. So I think it can be a helpful tool, but there's certainly more than 12 funders in the universe of funders who would be interested in my nonprofit. So I think you're going to be a little bit limited if you're just relying on AI tools for um, or the mainstream AI tools, at least for your prospecting. If you use a tool like Kindora, we're actually going to go and look at a much, much larger corpus of funders and help figure that out. Or you can, if you have the resourcing and the staff time to be able to engage, you can sign up for a tool like Instrumental, which is a great tool, but quite expensive. And I think part of our aspiration in building Kindora is to put the power of something like instrumental in the hands of smaller nonprofits who can hopefully afford a tool like ours in a much more accessible way.
Great, thank you. That's really helpful. I'll definitely go back and review all of this because right now it's just me and my CEO and two CFOs, which is stands for Canine Executive Officers and Chief Feline Officers. So it's really just me. Thank you.
Yeah. And I think like if you all have a prospect list that you already have, I think you could use OpenAI's deep research tool to do some really good research. And I think you could build your own organizational profile, put that into Claude, and it would really help you write some applications. But I think if you're interested in prospecting and finding more funders, definitely encourage you to check out Kindora, assuming that a small organization like yours wouldn't necessarily want to pay the $4,000 a year fee for instrumental, which can be out of reach for a lot of folks. Yeah.
Yeah, because the CEO and CFOs are useless. They just sleep all day.
Got it, got it, got it. Yeah. So I think Pandora could be, I mean, honestly, Amelia, we built it with organizations like yours in mind, like smaller, kind of founder-led, like strapped. I mean, that's who I am as Outdoor Rhythm Collective, right? Like no full-time staff. We're barely being able to pay anybody anything at this point. Like, and that's who we built it for. So ourselves first, and hopefully organizations like yours.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Great. I'll just jump in to clarify because we've had a few questions about this. We are, in fact, recording this um, webinar. Justin graciously agreed to that. So we will send the recording to everyone. I know there's a few people who came in late. You'll be able to catch up with the recording. I see Brooke has their hand raised.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. Hey, Justin, I met you a few years ago with Dr. Art Wong at the uh, at the headquarters. It was very fascinating. But I'm curious, how many
Awesome.
people are on this call, and is it national? It's just kind of basic questions.
On this specific webinar,
Yeah.
it looks like we've got 33 different organizations, and I think most of them are San Francisco based, right, team?
Yeah, probably most are San Francisco based. That's not to say that there might not be organizations that have national footprints. Here, most of the outreach went through the San Francisco
Should I
nonprofit
join
base.
in?
Brooke, you were speaking.
Oh, can you hear? Jerry, I think I know you too from Case, but in case, can you still hear me?
Yep.
Yes, anyway, this has been very enlightening and really appreciate this. It's changing my whole lens of how I view fundraising, grant writing, and research, and really, really very valuable. So I'm thankful to our board member for suggesting that I attend.
Nice. Good. I'm glad you found it useful. Leo.
Hey Justin, how you doing, my man?
Good friend. It's good to hear your voice.
Same here, man. I wish I could give you a hug, but I'll give you right now. First of all, thank you for really sharing your experience, the knowledge that you're bringing to organizations like mine and others on this wonderful call. So I have a question for you in respect of the ability for our fundraising team to really think about, do we need to bring eventually someone, of course, not with the caliber of knowledge that you have, but as you can imagine, running a nonprofit like mine, it takes a
Mhm.
lot of time. I don't have time to sit in front of ChatGPT or Gemini for 15, 20, whatever time that is.
Yeah.
What type of suggestion you have for an organization just like mine and others to start really paying attention? What type of fundraising staff member that you want to bring that can do the things that you have shown us today?
Yes, that's a great question. And I think for Outdoor Rhythm Collective, what we've tried to do is just have kind of an ongoing rhythm and commitment to applying to at least like 2 to 3 grants a week, you know? And I think the thing about using this process, the process, if you do it outside of Kindora, it takes a little bit longer, but if you do it inside Kindora, it shouldn't take you longer than, say 1 to 2 hours to be able to kind of completely get through a grant application or some initial outreach to do the networking if it's invite only. And so we typically take, yeah, for us is we're still founder led. So it's just one of a couple of us. Actually, my daughter, who's a junior in high school, is doing a team mental health initiative related to some outdoor rhythm collective work. So she's been in the tools as well. So if my daughter 16 can do it, I think, a junior staff person on your team, Leo, could probably do it too. And I think just, if you all are feeling good about, hey, I've got a good organizational profile in the mix, and we've kind of vetted these different funders, creating a draft of these applications, as you've seen, is pretty straightforward. And if you got somebody who understands the organization well and can read through and just do a quick edit, and then send to somebody like you or a senior person on your team to just say, "Hey, I'm about to apply, to the foundation here. Here are the answers that I'm putting together for the questions." And honestly, this is pretty low risk stuff. I mean, when I've been as a funder, the reality is, you're not going to get most of the grants you apply for.
Hmm.
Even the stated criteria that we put out on public, there's still, as you know, Leo, there's still other criteria behind the scenes, like does London Breed like you or not? Like we're not gonna put that in the application as Google, but it matters. And so it's like all of those types of things can be factors about whether organizations receive or don't receive grants. And so my whole mentality has just been like, hey, find like a really good universe of funders that you think you're a good fit for, and Kindora can help you figure out what that list is, and then just have the discipline to spend a half a day, or 3/4 of a day a week just getting applications out there. And like, what's the worst that can happen? I think Outdoor Rhythm Collective has raised $100,000 this year, mostly of like $5,000 and $10,000 grants from small family and private foundations that we'd never heard of. And that's just kind of like our rhythm. Like we just kind of get them out there. And I do think, a junior person on your team could largely do that. You might want to have a senior person on your team, review the final questions before, you submit, just to gut check it. But maybe even not. I mean, I'm letting my 16-year-old just apply for these mental health grants whenever she wants. I don't even read her responses. I know they're going to be good because they're coming through the tool, and they're living inside of our profile. So I'm like, hey, Sienna, go at it. Tell me. And she got one. She actually called me from school last week and was like, I got a $5,000 AE Foundation grant. I was like, it's amazing. She just won a $5,000 grant just by doing this. So I think you can have a junior person on your team probably do it.
Thank you. You're a great father, by the way, and I appreciate
Thank you. I'm trying to
all
be.
of us.
These kids are tough.
Hey, I train a lot, so you know where I'm coming from.
Yeah,
Thank
I
you.
know it. I
Appreciate it.
know it. All right, I see another question in here about the privacy piece. Yeah, Jerry, do you want me to jump in on that one? Yep. Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I think we should all be really, I should have probably come off the top with that too. Privacy is a big concern. If you're using the user interface AI models, you want to make sure you go into your privacy settings, and you toggle off training on your data. Most of the models by default are going to train on your data. And so you got to go find the option to turn that off. And then that way they're not going to be, I think they keep a record for like 30 days of your prompts just for safety purposes, but they won't use it if you turn the toggle off. Now, the good thing about if you're an enterprise client like Kindora and you're using the API calls instead of the user interface, by default, none of these companies are training on the API call data. I mean, you can imagine like, a company like Nike would never allow someone like OpenAI to train on their proprietary data. So when you're in the API realm of like enterprise connections, they're not training on any of that data. You just need to know, if you're going to use a tool like Kindora, like what's your privacy policy and what models are you using. You want to make sure someone's not using, for instance, like DeepSeek in the cloud, because all of your data is going to be sent back to China. And there's some privacy concerns there. But if you read the privacy policy on Kindora's website, we're super transparent. We use OpenAI for reasoning. We use Claude models for writing. We use Perplexity models for searching. And all of those, I think we even include specific sort of like when we use the API calls, all of your data is private and secure. We store our data in Condora in Supabase, which uses Amazon Web Services servers that are based here in the United States. So even the database data that's being stored is all here local in the country. So it's a great question. I think if you're using the user interfaces like I showed you earlier, you should go in and turn off data sharing. If you're using a tool like Endora, you should ask them for their privacy policy and just make sure that they're using models that aren't going to be training on your data. The big reputable providers, Gemini, OpenAI, Claude, they're not going to train on your data through the API calls. They're business clients. Businesses don't want companies training on their data. So that was a good question.
Thank you, Justin, for being super thorough in terms of your responses to these
Hmm.
questions. We have one here from Susie,
Hmm.
um, sharing that can you recommend training programs to familiarize yourself with some of the AI platforms?
Yeah, look, I think all the major tech companies have some training programs. Right before I left Google, Google created an AI essentials course that I took that I thought was pretty good, just to give you an understanding of like what is AI, how do the models work. Anthropic just sent me, they have a training seminars, and their material looked good too. But honestly, I think because AI is all prompted in natural language, it's one of these situations where I would honestly say just experiment. Like, maybe you wanted to familiarize yourself a little bit with AI safety, and just to make sure that you kind of understand the limitations of the models, where they might hallucinate, things like that. But most of what I've taught myself here into using these AI tools has just been experimentation, because I don't need any technical knowledge to go prompt an AI tool. All I need to do is just use my own language and my own prompts. And then I look at the output and I say, that's not quite what I wanted. Can you try again? And then over time, you just kind of learn. That's why I shared the documents, my prompting documents with you all, because those have been, very refined over time as I've tried to prompt for different profiles and things like that. Like you kind of learn what works and what doesn't work. And so that's why I wanted to share some of my prompting documents with you all. But so yeah, I would say if any of the major tech companies will probably have an AI essentials course. If you're really truly coming into AI and you've never used it before, I would just say pick one of those. I'm sure Coursera even would have a good general primer course, but most of what I've learned has just been by using my own prompting and just kind of going along and trial and error. And if you ever hit a point where you're like, I don't know what to do next here, you just literally tell the AI, I don't know what to do next here, can you help me figure out like where to go from here? And that's really the power of AI, is that everything is just in your own language, which is pretty amazing. um, yeah.
Thank you for that. We have a question here from Jenny H. Are those fun information on the search research results updated? So it sounds like it's related to Kindora and the search
Ah,
results, asking if that fun
yeah.
information updated on a recurring basis.
Yeah, that's a great question. We have some limited functionality right now to update with new grant opportunities, but that's the number one feature that we're working on. I think everybody wants real-time intelligence, right? Like, hey, Google dropped a new grant program yesterday, you should apply. That kind of intelligence is really hard to get. You essentially you have to monitor every funder's website, and you have to figure out which URLs on those websites are actually contain useful information, and you need to scrape them on a regular basis to be able to surface those opportunities. So we have a prototype that we've got going right now. I think it's honestly one of the things that Instrumental does really, really well is they've got a good intelligence system for monitoring what grant opportunities are newly available. So if your organization is in a position to pay the high price, I think they do an excellent job of surfacing new opportunities. Again, you kind of, because those opportunities aren't super tailored, you have to have the time and the staff team to be able to go through and read each one and kind of vet it yourself, whereas Kindora kind of does that for you. And stack ranks the opportunities, so you don't have to waste your time, on an obvious opportunity that's not a fit. But so yeah, that's something that I was at an Amazon Web Services accelerator program 2 weeks ago in Seattle, and I had an opportunity to spend a bunch of time with their solutions architects and talk about technical challenges. And that's the number one thing for me is like, if I can develop a good system for constantly refreshing that intelligence and figuring out what opportunities are available, I can give you instrumentals kind of intelligence for a fraction of the price and make it really accessible, not just to the top 10% of the nonprofit sector that can afford the tool and afford the team to be able to use the tool, but I can give it to everybody. And so that's what I'm pushing towards. I'm hoping that we can get there. I also see there's a question about international programs. Yes, so right now Kindora is only US based funders, but obviously a lot of US based funders fund international programs. So you'd be limiting yourself to people funders who are based out of the United States, but you can certainly search for programs and funders who fund things from the United States outside of the United States. So yeah. Okay, I see another one from Grace Chen here. So you mentioned make sure you're still reading over the outputs. What other best practices would you advise people adhere to in this space? Let's see, what else is there? Yeah, I mean, human in the loop is important. I think you don't generally want to just have the raw output of AI and just take it for its word. It does because it is the underlying technology is just pattern recognition in word, kind of like forecasting. It can very convincingly make things up, and so you always want to take a look at the output, make sure it hasn't made anything up, and I would say put in your prompts that hey, I only want you to work from these existing documents and not pull from anything else, cite your sources, that type of thing. Um, what else? I do think it's really helpful to play the models off of each other. I mentioned I do that a lot, but like I'll take whatever the first output from like a Claude model is, and I'll go over to OpenAI's reasoning model. I'll give it the same set of documents that I used to do the original prompts in Claude, and I will say, hey, take a look at this and provide a critique. One thing that you want to be careful of with AI models is that they sometimes are kind of biased towards giving you what you want. So they can be overly generous in their praise. And like you might submit an application draft and say, hey, what do you think about this? And sometimes they can be very like effusive and be like, this is the best application I've ever seen. And so one of the things that I oftentimes do is say, like I want you to really critique this with a critical eye, like you're a program officer. When I provide the critique back to Claude, I will oftentimes tell it like, hey, don't assume that this critique is correct because sometimes it'll over anchor and be like, oh yeah, this is great. I'll change everything. I'm like, nope, don't assume it's correct. Evaluate every single one of the points it makes, decide which ones are strong, and incorporate what you think makes it stronger. Ignore the things that you don't. So just like little tips and tricks like that. Yeah, it's AI definitely knows that you're going to use it more if it's pumping you up. So you kind of have to get around that. This is a little bit outside of grant writing, but I do a lot of writing on LinkedIn, and after I write a draft of a LinkedIn post, I will oftentimes go into Claude and I'll say, I'll start with some of my intellectual heroes. So I'll say something like, you are James Baldwin or you are Ta-Nehisi Coates or whatever. And I'm like, write a response to this article in the Atlantic, and I will see how an AI model that's personifying an intellectual, Michael Sandel, Jonathan Haidt, whatever, I'll see how they respond, and that really helps push my thinking. And I'll also sometimes have it personify people who think differently than me. Somebody like a JD Vance, so I'll just be like, "You're JD Vance. You're writing a response in Fox like tear my piece up and tell me what was wrong with it. And so I think there's some cool ways that you can use to personify different perspectives and really push your thinking. I suppose you could do that with your grant writing if you wanted to as well, but I mostly do that with my longer form, like articles and posts and stuff. So um, let's see what else. I have never heard of openevidence.com, so I don't think I can speak to that one. Oftentimes, when I'm trying to figure out how trustworthy something is, I will go to Perplexity and do a web search on it. So even emails that seem like fishy, I just copy paste into Perplexity. Perplexity search the web, and I'll ask it specifically, like, how trustworthy is this, or is this a reputable organization? And if I really want to be specific, sometimes I'll just tell Perplexity, like, search Reddit. What do people on Reddit say about this? People on Reddit tend not to hold back. So that's a little tip if you're trying to do some gut checking there. What else? If there's not other questions, I could show you all Claude Code if you're interested in that. But I think you definitely use Kindora if this is a nonprofit and help prospect like just institutional funders who might want to fund, and then you can get your funder prospect list and go out and sort of prospect among that group, and it'll help you generate outreach material too, so you could connect with people on LinkedIn at funders. Um, Individual investors is a whole other conversation, which is much harder to do than institutional and not an easy way to crack it. I'm still thinking about ways I might help facilitate it, but most individual funders don't want to be found. And so there's really no substitute for your own personal networks or professional networks that you've got curated. So, yeah.
Well, we're about 5 minutes to closing time. Want to say thank you. We're super thankful and full now with this conversation and dialogue that you provided for us, Justin. Um, I do want to make a plug. Um, if folks are um, captured by this conversation and interested in kind of continuing the conversation, Justin will be with us at the public library in December on December 15th. Um, we're going to be having what is AI Week. I'll just drop it in the chat here. San Francisco AI Week, where we will do a panel and a workshop on practical AI use for small businesses and community organizations. And Justin's going to be one of our panel has agreed to be one of our panelists. So with a bit more of this and an opportunity to also do more of a deep dive in person. So I want to put a plug there. Thank you, Justin, for your time.
Yeah,
And
for
with that,
sure.
I will pass it over to you, Julianne.
Yes, thank you so much, Justin. We really appreciate your time and expertise. That was fascinating. I learned a lot, and I know I want to share this webinar with our library fundraising group, the San Francisco Friends
Yes.
of the Library.
Good.
Um, Maybe they'll want to check out Kindora. I think it could definitely help them a lot with their the fundraising they do for our
That's great.
organization. So I really appreciate this. It was so enlightening. I also learned some things that I'll try to implement in my own work here. Really excited that you'll be in person at the library in December. Thank you, Jerry, for plugging that event. We hope to see some of you there. And I really want to thank Jerry Trotter and the Office of Economic and Workforce Development for your amazing partnership in bringing programs like this to our community. There is a brief survey that will come up at the end of the Zoom call. We encourage folks to fill it out to give us some feedback on today. Um, Jerry and Justin, anything else you'd like to share in closing?
No, I just thank you, Julianne. Thank you, Jerry, for the space to share, and hopefully it inspired some new thinking. And yeah, I hope that folks will be able to go in eyes wide open with these tools, understand sort of the limitations and the risk, but also not be afraid to go in and experiment. I think, like I said, these are super powerful tools, and I think that we can all do our work faster, better, more scalable. And if we don't, then we're just going to see these tools concentrated among a small class of people, and it's going to, I think, increase the inequality rather than redistribute it in our country. So I hope that this has sparked some of you all to sort of get out there and use them so we can spread the benefits.
Absolutely. And I hope you feel the love. Someone said it's been mind-blowingly helpful and very inspiring.
Great. Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I think it's also important to say, right, we hear that the sector is very interested in the AI tool and how to access it and how to put it and include it within their tool belt. Um, Julianne kind of plugged earlier a workshop that's coming early December, right? So this is not a conversation that's right that's ending. It's ever evolving, and we want the Small Business Center, Justin, myself at the Office of Economic and Workforce Development, as we're thinking about business development, to continue to be partners in that conversation, in terms of looking at avenues and resources and ways to, to really bring that to your business delivery.
That's great. That's awesome. Thank you, guys.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jerry. I will include those events in the follow-up email, which will also include the recording of this amazing webinar. Thank you, Justin, again, and thank you everyone for attending. This has been really wonderful. We hope to see you at a future event. Take care, everyone.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.